knew I had it from when you handed it to me.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Tonight is Monday, October 21st, 2013. We're here for the regularly scheduled meeting of the Elmhurst City Council. Before I ask you to all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, I would ask that Gunner Klang, Eagle Scout Gunner Klang, and the rest of Troop 78 come forward to help lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, Gunner, don't get started yet. Wait till you're set. Because I want to say a couple of words. Okay, so Gunner's up here on my left. Raise your hand, Gunner. So Gunner's an Eagle Scout, which I think we all know is a fantastic achievement. I can personally say this: every Eagle Scout I've ever interviewed in the job world, I've hired. But Gunner, if he's like most Eagle Scouts, I know probably doesn't want to talk about his achievements. So I'm going to do a little bit of that for him, and then I will allow him to lead us in the pledge. On May 10th, 2013, Gunner Klang, a sophomore at York High School, was honored with the Eagle Medal at a Court of Honor at St. Peter's United Church of Christ in Elmhurst. St. Peter's is the charter organization for Troop 78, which you see here before you. For his Eagle project, Gunner planned, led, and completed a beach erosion prevention project at Wesley Woods on Lake Geneva in Williams Bay, Wisconsin. Wesley Woods is operated by Outdoor and Retreat Ministries and owned by the Northern Illinois Conference of the United Methodist Church. During a two-day weekend in June 2012, more than 15 scouts, parents, and several from Elmhurst's First United Methodist Church contributed more than 130 man-hours to complete this project. Jeff Fry, the camp director at Wesley Woods, congratulated Gunner and his workers for doing such an outstanding job on his way to Eagle Scout. Gunner earned 38 merit badges. Let me repeat that. Gunner earned 38 merit badges. Only 21 are required for Eagle. He went above and beyond in participation in monthly service projects with Troop 78, which include giving service to pads, as well as many other community projects. Less than 3% of all of those who start out in scouting make it to Eagle Scout. So this truly is a great accomplishment. Congratulations, Gunner. Let's give him a round of applause. Okay, we're going to ask Troop 78 to take over. Would you like us to rise? Flags over here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks again. I'm going to let Troop 78 sit down. Gunner, I want you to come around and shake everyone's hand here.
Thank you. Congratulations. Good work.
A model Elmhurst resident.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Great job, Gunner.
Yeah.
That one?
Ooh.
Crutches? Yeah.
Harry breaks his
Usually
ankle.
only the first one.
Breaks his ankle.
Okay. Thanks again, Gunner, for your help. Clerk Spencer, please call the roll to establish quorum.
Gutenkopf. Here. Deuter. Dunn.
Here.
Leader. Here. Kolumsky.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Gipskin.
Here.
York.
Here.
Levin.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Honquist.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
14 present, 0 absent.
14 present, 0 absent. We have a quorum. Okay. On to agenda item number 3, written receipt of written communications for the public. Is there anybody in the audience at this time that has any written communication that they would like to submit to the city council? If so, please approach Clerk Spencer and hand her a copy. I see Ms. Brenner coming along. Is there anybody else who has anything they'd like to submit? Thank you. Seeing no more receipts of written communication, we'll move on to agenda item 4. That's public forum. This is the opportunity at this time during our meeting where we allow members from the public or the audience to speak on any matter they so choose. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. You can speak about anything that you choose. You may not necessarily get an answer this evening, but we encourage you to participate in public forum. We do ask you to keep it to 3 minutes out of respect for other folks who do want to speak, and also for our time up here, as we do have a meeting to complete. At this time, Clerk Spencer, has anybody signed up for public forum?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We'll start with Gilbert Fisher, 586 North Van Auken.
Mr. Fisher, if you could approach the microphone that's behind you there, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Gilbert Fisher, 586 North Van Auken Street, Elmhurst, Illinois. As I reported to you 2 weeks ago, my wife, who is 78 years old, went back to work to help pay the taxes that you, my government, have put on our house. We have been retired for 13 years, and every year we live, we get less money on our retirement checks. But you, our government, have kept raising our taxes on our house. I'm imploring you to stop buying property, stop building houses, cut our taxes so that we, the elderly, can live in peace. We were grateful to be retired for 13 years, but now we have to go back to work to pay taxes to our government. Our streets are no good. Our sewers are no good. Last week, the water I got out of the faucet in my bathroom was so bad I couldn't brush my teeth with it. I also had to take my toilet apart and fix the flapper on it because it was all full of little stones and sands coming from the water that you're putting in my house. You cannot fix the streets, you cannot fix the sewers, and you can't give us livable water to drink, but boy, you can tax us to buy property and build houses and anything you want. This is wrong. I'm imploring you to stop all this buying, cut our taxes, and let us live in peace. Thank you.
Claude Pagash, 566 North Gladys.
How many do we have?
Claude Pagash, 566 West Gladys. For all the people that may listen to this on TV, I would ask you to get a hold of the Elmhurst Independent. The city by law has to publish a treasurer's report. If you haven't seen it, get a copy of the paper. It's an interesting document. It lacks a few things, and that'll be for the future. The one thing it does point out is we do pay for general obligation bonds. And last time I checked, if you're a resident of this town, you are stuck with paying general obligation bonds until 2029. But the city's been playing with general obligation bonds. It's probably 2030 now, so this is only 2000 and what? Well, so you got a long way to go on paying general obligation bonds. So every time you hear this council say general obligation bonds, just remember, has another few more years of paying general obligation bonds. Yep. And then the builders, they all ran over to Public Works, or the committee, and we're a little adamant about these tanks and manholes in the backyards. I don't think they're worried about cost. That has nothing to do with it. They'll just pass it on to whoever wants to buy it. But they would have to explain why there's a tank buried. And they'd have to explain why there's a manhole in the backyard. And that might just convince a buyer to go find a house somewhere else because they don't want their house flooded. But that's the way it is. But I don't think they're worried about the cost of it. They just pass it on to whoever wants to buy it. There were some people that came down to this town. They had come up with a petition, eliminate a sidewalk. In fact, they had gone to the trouble of going to the city. The city was kind enough to not tell them everything they should have done. It's amazing. They get a letter from our legal department. Not enough electors signed. Isn't that amazing? County doesn't have problems sending them their property tax bill. City doesn't have problems sending the bill for water and sewage and everything else. But when it comes down to stopping a sidewalk in an area, all of a sudden they're not electors. Amazing, isn't it? They've moved in, don't know what it's going to cost, but they're going to get a sidewalk. Because that's the way the law is, right, Mr. Levin? It's the law. But the city failed to tell them what they had to do. And now we got this little project down on Hahn. The hue and cry from the alderman was, we got to send out all kinds of advertising, got to get as many people as we can to bid on this thing. My firm belief is this, gentlemen. If Inland Retail came down here to develop it, if Blackstone came down to develop it, if Trump showed up down here and said they would develop it, Morningstar, who had it all tied up for years, would still be a candidate.
Mr. Pragash, you're over 3 minutes. I'd ask you to wrap it up, please.
Surely. And then we got the budget coming up. I hope the people of this town look at that treasurer's report, because if they don't, they're really in trouble.
Clerk Spencer?
Yes, John Dulles, 128 Addison, Dulles.
Ladies and gentlemen of the council, my fellow taxpayers, I see from the last time I spoke...
Could you state your name and address for the audience?
John Dulles, D-U-L-L-E-S, 128 North Addison, right across the street from the proposed 8-story garage. I see that from the last time I spoke, council and mayor and chairman, the light of disinfectant on this council and this city hasn't penetrated the walls of City Hall. I see that the stench of corruption is permeating and is smelling up this place even more. We're going from 4 stories to 8 stories now, against the will of the people. We don't want it in the business community. We never wanted this garage. It was a corrupt deal from the Mayor Marcucci and our former politicians and our current politicians are going along to get along. Going along to get along is with the city. I've dealt with the former mayor, Levin, the alderman here, Molnar. They came to my store, giving me stories until I voted for them, until after they lost or they won, they went back to their same old, same old. We got corruption here. We see this here on a major level. We don't want this we have $5.5 million invested in the property on Addison right now. They're talking from anywhere from $12 to $14 million more to build an 8-story garage that we don't want. Who's the boss in this town here? The taxpayers or you up there sitting on the council? This Taj Mahal belongs to us, the taxpayers, not you. You're temporary public servants. You work for us. And all of you up here forgot about that. You all forgot about it, and you laugh at us after. Well, who's going to be laughing last? You going to laugh at us? Or are you going to, last meeting that I was at here, we all spoke here, 99% of the people that spoke against the garage. As soon as we stopped speaking, you went on to talk about no loading dock. Like we weren't here, like nobody was sitting in the audience. You got a problem here, buddy. All of you got a problem. And the problem is that you don't listen to your bosses out here, the taxpayers. You lost your perspective. Who you work for, who pays your way, who pays for this Taj Mahal. It's owned by us. These people you sitting over here, busting their rear ends every night, to work hard to pay for this town and pay for the fees and pay for the taxes? I had 2 customers come into my store today. They said, we can't afford to live in Elmhurst anymore. They were paying $14,000 real estate taxes. Other people are coming in my store and saying, we got flooding problems in this town. How come they're not correcting the flooding problems? They're worrying about building an 8-story garage for Willis Johnson. Willis Johnson made enough money at blood-sucking off of us here over the years with the TIF money. He owns half of York Road. We've given him enough money. We're not going to build him an 8-story garage.
Mr. Dulles, you're at 3 minutes. I'd ask you to wrap it up.
Wait till voting comes on next year. These people here won't take it anymore. Your jobs are going to be eliminated.
Willis Johnson, 150 North York.
Willis Johnson, 150 North York. Tonight you are going to, I hope, take some further action as far as the Addison Street project is concerned. And in reviewing the parking report from Gwalt Hamilton, it at least is evident to me that we need a minimum of 600 and hopefully 700 parking spaces. And I would hope that in your deliberations that you would take that into consideration when you discuss height. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Tamara Brenner, 137 North Caroline.
Tamara Brenner, 137 North Caroline. I also have a few thoughts still on the Addison project. I hope action is taken tonight, which is to put to rest the whole notion of building anything greater than 45 feet on the Addison Garage project. I'd like to remind the council that you've heard from over 250 individuals that do not want you to build a taller than 4-story garage. There were 227 signatures on a petition collected by a local business owner, and there's been at least 30 individuals who have gotten up here to speak to you or at the zoning commission public hearing that occurred once to reject the 6 stories, or who have written letters or emails to you. There's over 250 people that said, please don't do this. And you've got a small number of business interests that say, yeah, we should do it. City staff has spent a lot of time meeting with inner circle of business interests. They've met with the EDC, City Center, and Chamber of Commerce. They've worked on writing the resolutions and letters of support. The people who are going to be funding the project, 100% general obligation bonds, are the taxpayers and the residents. And I've never been offered an opportunity to sit with city staff to work through the many, many issues that have been brought up by myself and others. I think we have legitimate questions and concerns, and actually we actually have data now from the parking study that shows that the 6-story garage really isn't indicated. I sent an email to the council and the mayor today detailing some of that. It's complicated because there's math involved here. The futuristic part of the parking study bases its projections on industry standards similar to the zoning code minimum parking requirements that gave us the supposed 2,500 space parking deficit in the central business district. We don't have a 2,500 space parking deficit in the central business district. We actually have a surplus of parking there. The same calculations are going to tell you you need 963 new spaces to accommodate proposed new development in the future, which means 600 additional spaces to counteract the surplus that we have. These calculations really don't hold water when compared to actual reality. Industry standards are one thing, but apparently the industry standard is to overbuild parking. There's no law that says you must follow an industry standard that tells you to overbuild parking. You don't have to do that, and you should not do it. You will have plenty of parking with a 450-ish space parking garage to accommodate the proposed development listed in the parking study, plus some more. Interesting, too, about that parking study, it kind of reads to me like it was dictated by city staff, and the framing of it, with the garage being the center of the universe, indicates the way the question was put to the consultant, which is not the way I would have put it to them. But again, the parking study does not support building the 6-story garage. Also, the cost estimates you guys referred to several times, that's how much cheaper it would be to build these additional parking levels now. The city refuses to disclose the basis of these cost estimates. I have asked for them, and the city is refusing to give them. I hope common sense will prevail on that eventually. Of course, if you do the right thing tonight, which is to not proceed with the 6 stories, then it doesn't really matter quite so much on that piece of it.
Ms.
What I
Brenner,
think
you're
you
right.
guys should do.
You're at 3 minutes. If you could wrap it
I
up,
will
I'd
give you my
appreciate it.
last sentence now. What you guys should do is go forward with the 4-story plan. You've got a lot of work to do even with that, which is studying traffic flow, two-way traffic flow on Addison, having ingress and egress on Addison. You haven't studied it, plus the flow on the alley needs to be studied. Put in the part to potentially expand the garage later and call it a day. Get the project started now. Don't wait any longer.
All right. Last person to sign in for tonight is Paula Pezza, 275 Cottage Hill.
Hello. Paula Pezza, 275 Cottage Hill. I'm here tonight to remind the Elmhurst taxpayers of a few things regarding this Addison parking deck. This parking deck is being funded 100% by GO bonds, which means you, your children, and most likely your grandchildren, will be paying back the close to $20 million cost of this deck on your Elmhurst tax bills for many years to come. I'd also like to remind you, this project, since its inception, has been discussed behind closed doors by your city staff and your elected officials. This is the very project that was discussed in closed meetings during my aldermanic term, which led me to file a complaint with the Attorney General's office, who found the city of Elmhurst in violation of the Open Meetings Act in March of this year for discussing the zoning of this project illegally behind closed doors. At that time, Mayor Morley was the aldermanic chair of the DPZ committee and one of the most vocal in those closed meetings to state how much he wanted to see 6 stories go up in that location and that whole area. In those same closed meetings, enough support was expressed to prompt a going forward, knowing that the votes were there. As our mayor, this 6-story agenda is still being pushed forward, despite our zoning commission voting it down unanimously and expressing many thoughtful concerns and questions, many of which have not been addressed and some even ignored. This council has also received many calls, letters, emails, signatures on petitions, and pleas from residents and business owners not to build the 6 stories, but that doesn't seem to matter. What is it that you know that the rest of us, the people paying for this project, don't know? Why the big push when just a handful of potentially vested interests are asking for this? Who are we setting this precedent for? What big project is headed our way in the near future that can use this project to help approve their own? What is someone planning on building that will need this much parking? Please let us in on the secret. We'd love to know. Let's not forget, if it's a residential coming, they must provide their own parking. But maybe not if an excess is conveniently built courtesy of the Elmhurst taxpayers. The most recent, and in my opinion, pretty lame consultant report, basically based on what-if scenarios, does not prove a need for this mammoth garage that will forever alter the integrity of what brings and attracts people to our town. What if we bulldoze the whole C4 district in 2020 and replaced it with skyscrapers? Then this 6-story garage would be pretty useless after all. I certainly hope that I am not just the Lorax, and it's not Mayor Onceler pushing the agenda in vain, and we don't end up in the future referring to this project as the Thneedville parking deck. Thank you.
Okay, she was the last one to sign in, Mr. Mayor.
Is there anybody else at this time who did not have an opportunity to sign in who'd like to speak? I see, wait a second, let me just get a show of hands. Is there anybody else? I see one person, anybody else? Okay. Ma'am, please approach the microphone on this side, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes. Okay.
Keely Witzel, 277 Berkeley. In the past, I've mentioned my displeasure in this parking deck on Addison exceeding 45 feet, and I just want to reiterate that 45 feet is much taller than the surrounding buildings, and it will aesthetically negatively impact that area. once a development in the future may happen on the west side of Addison, that may change, but at this point, that building should not exceed 45 feet. We do not need more parking than what's already proposed. Thank you.
Very good. Anyone else at this time would like to speak at public forum? Seeing none, we'll move on. Announcements. Any announcements from the dais? Alderman York.
Thank you, Your Honor. First of all, the bike ride to the south and west side, there was about an hour and a half of rain on that Saturday, and it occurred exactly at the time the bicycle ride was scheduled for. Therefore, we didn't go, and that ride will be will be done in spring. On another note, as we were hoping for and dreaming for, Elmhurst was recently awarded bike-friendly bronze status by the League of American Bicyclists. It's a 4-year designation. Elmhurst is one of 7 Illinois communities to be so recognized and one of about 300 nationwide. Congratulations to the Bicycle Task Force and specifically Bob Hole. There will be a recognition on November 4th here at City Council for that achievement.
Great. Alderman York. Anybody else? Alderman Levin.
Thank you. This Wednesday, day after tomorrow, October 23rd at 7:30, Alderman Healy and I will be sponsoring the 5th Ward Town Hall meeting at Knights of Columbus on York Road.
Any other announcements at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda, agenda item number 6. At this time, is there anybody on the dais who would like to remove anything from the consent agenda for further discussion?
Sure.
Why not?
Why not?
Alderman Bram?
It's not like this meeting's not going to be long. Item number 6.7.
6.7, Berteau Campus, 6.7, okay. Any other items on the consent agenda that anyone on the dais wishes to see removed for possible further discussion? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed minus agenda item 6.7. Asking for a motion, Alderman Bram with a motion, Alderman Deuter with a second. Clerk Spencer?
Bram.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Polumsky.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Honquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
14 ayes, 0 nays.
14 ayes, 0 nays, that motion carries. The consent agenda minus item 6.7 passes. Item 6.7 appears to be a report from Public Affairs and Safety. I would ask for a motion to, Clerk Spencer, you want to read, read the recommendation?
Okay. It is therefore the recommendation of the Public Affairs and Safety Committee that the city attorney be directed to prepare the appropriate ordinance to remove the parking restrictions on Avon Road as listed above. Signed by Patrick Wagner, Chairman, Norman Leader, Vice Chairman, and Michael Honquist.
Okay, I'd like a motion to approve the recommendation as read. A motion by Alderman Wagner, second by Alderman Leader. Discussion. Alderman Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to defer to the question that Alderman Bram is concerned with.
Okay, Alderman Bram, you had this pulled. You want to enlighten us?
Sure. Yeah, 2 what I would deem to be basic questions, and I apologize for not being able to contact the committee beforehand on these questions, but when I was on Public Affairs and Safety Committee, we discussed this, and it was part of the pending items list due to the fact of the uncertainty of the Berteau campus. I believe there still is uncertainty of the Berteau campus, so the first question is, why has the committee decided to move forward now? And then the second question is in regards to the survey results from the neighboring streets around the campus. The summary shows that for whatever reason, Avon had an option of one side only, and the other 3 streets did not in regards to the survey. So what was the rationale for the difference of that one street compared to the other 3, I should say blocks, not street?
Alderman Wagner, why now, and clarification on a couple of the options that were offered.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Why now? I think the surveys actually had gone out, they compiled the results, and Avon was the only street that wanted the changes to the one side. All the rest of them hadn't made the changes, or didn't want the changes. So that was it.
Why?
We're just removing two, stops on both sides to stops on only the east side, if I recall.
Understood. How come we're moving forward before we have some certainty of what's going on with the Berthoud campus?
That's what the residents have asked for.
Alderman York, you wanted to add to this? I think this was coming out of a referral from you originally.
Right. Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, this is a referral from Alderman Polomsky and I. And actually, I'd received several requests from especially residents of Avon asking that parking restrictions be eased on their street. They had no parking anywhere on their street versus Pine Street, which has parking on one side of the street. Berthoud does not have any parking on either side of the street there. So originally, this kind of came up as a result of inquiries from residents wanting to be able to park their cars on the street, as probably 95% of the residents in Elmhurst can currently. So we did a survey, and the survey question was, do you want to ease restrictions? And on Avon, it was parking on both sides of the streets, and a number of people indicated yes, that would be fine with them, but another faction of Avon Street said, we would like to see parking restrictions eased, but only on one side of the street. And so that was kind of the compromise that was reached by that survey. And so that's the direction that the committee has gone. And with regards to waiting until the hospital, the use for that property is determined, that could be quite a long wait. And actually, several residents had indicated, and some of them along Berthoud, that they felt like, in reality, some of them were selling their houses, and people weren't interested in buying their houses because there was no parking on the street. They had to park their cars on the driveway. So it's one of those things that it's just a democratic process. I heard from residents in my ward, and I tried to act on their behalves to change some things.
Okay, any additional comments? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Yeah, actually, a question, because I'm not really sure I understand something in the report, which says that any no response was counted as a yes vote. But if that's the case, I'm not sure I understand the math. Because when you look at...
70%.
Oh, it has to hit 70%? Oh, thank you.
Asked and answered. Yes? Any additional comments? Clerk Spencer, please call the roll.
Wagner.
I'm sorry, Alderman Bram, I didn't see you. Did you have
Yeah,
an
just
additional
really quick.
comment?
I just want to make sure it's clear that I'm asking the questions because I'm concerned, depending on what goes in the Berthoud campus, we might need to come back and take away the privilege that we might be giving them tonight. That's why initially when we discussed it, we were going to hold off until there was more certainty of the Berthoud campus. I'm in favor when it is when there is not a safety issue of giving obviously additional parking on the streets. It's public streets. Now that the hospital is no longer there, it's definitely a lot safer. There's definitely a lot less traffic along Berthoud as well as some of the other streets. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. My biggest concern was I don't want to come back 2-3 years later and say, now we need to take this away from you. So that is the substance of the question. Thank you.
Okay, any additional comments? Seeing none, I ask Clerk Spencer to please call the vote.
Wagner.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Polomsky.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Conquest.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
14 ayes, 0 nays.
14 ayes, 0 nays. That motion passes. On to committee reports. Agenda item 7.1, policy regarding annual requirement for estimated property tax. Clerk Spencer, could you?
It is therefore the recommendation of the Finance, Council Affairs, and Administrative Services Committee that the City Council approve a policy to estimate the tax levy at prior year's tax levy adjusted by the lesser of the Consumer Price Index. All urban consumers for June of the current year, or 5%, in order to comply with the Illinois Truth in Taxation law requirement. Signed by Kevin L. York, Chairman, Bob Dunn, Vice Chairman, Stephen W. Hipskin, and Marty Deuter.
Very good. I'd ask for a motion to approve the recommendation as read. So moved by Alderman York, second by Alderman Hipskin. Alderman York, your report.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think the report is pretty clear what we're suggesting be done here. Every year, we seem to have two debates regarding the tax levy. One of them is very meaningful, and the other is not so much, since we have to provide an estimate for truth in taxation prior to the actual tax levy. So the essence of this report says that we'll take away all the staff time, council time on doing the estimate, and devote our full resources to actually spending a little bit more time looking at the actual numbers and the actual tax levy. So that is really the essence of this report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any additional comments or questions with regard to this report? Seeing none, I'll ask Clerk Spencer to please call the roll.
York.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Heinquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Polumsky.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
14 ayes, 0 nays.
14 ayes, 0 nays. That motion carries. Report passes. On to agenda item 7.2, also from Finance and Council Affairs. Clerk Spencer, could you please read the recommendation?
It is therefore the recommendation of the Finance, Council Affairs, and Administrative Services Committee that the City Council approve the funding policy changes for the Police Pension Fund and Firefighter Pension Fund, which are the change in the investment rate of return to 7% and utilize the 2000 mortality table. Furthermore, let's see, written funding policy for the Police Pension Fund and Firefighter Pension Fund pursuant to the GASB Statements 67 and 68. Signed by Kevin L. York, Chairman, Bob Dunn, Vice Chairman, Stephen W. Hipskin, and Marty Deuter.
Very good. To put this before, I'd ask for a motion to approve by Alderman York and a second by Alderman Hipskin. Alderman York, your report.
Okay, thank you. And just a real quick, back to the last report, I know, I just wanted to recognize that city staff was the one who made that recommendation on that, and I think it's an awesome recommendation. On the pension report before us right now, I'd like to first thank the committee and city staff. This is a difficult topic for all of us to get our arms around on a lot of levels, and a lot of good discussion at the committee level has led to lots of requests for information from city staff that was delivered timely and professionally. I personally believe we've reached a good conclusion and would ask for your support on this report. As noted in the report, our public safety pension obligations come in the form of unfunded mandates from the Illinois General Assembly, and over the course of time, pension benefits have changed. Generally, they've been sweetened, and that is a major contributor to the unfunded liabilities that we are addressing presently. A change in the vesting schedule for pension benefits, for example, 5 years less service required, could literally create tens of millions of dollars of unfunded liabilities literally overnight. But that's really not what we're considering here. We're going to try and solve the problem. The funding of pension obligations is controlled by assumptions that we make and ones that are made for us. We control how long we want to take to catch up, which is the amortization period. We make assumptions of what we think the rate of return will be on assets that we deliver to investors, including methods to smooth the results for comparison purposes. We also project what we think wage increases will be over the term of a public safety's employee's tenure. And this information is all then bundled and turned over to an actuary to do what actuaries do, and that is to model the assumptions over what the average person's lifespan is, and in the case of public safety employees, what their spouse's lifespan will be also. They arrive at a number that will be required to meet future obligations to pay the pension benefits, and then work backwards today to determine what the contributions must be made presently to deliver those future payments. I'd like to make a couple points of clarification on the report, and the first is related to the mortality table that is used. The 1971 mortality table was the standard prior to the Illinois Department of Insurance Commission in a study, and that was that study was issued in September of 2012. The study introduced the 2000 mortality table, which is now the accepted standard. The oversight body for professional actuaries is the Actuarial Standards Board. This board establishes actuarial standards of practice. ASOP is the acronym. And ASOP number 35 provides guidelines for demographic assumptions. Due to the in-depth study underlying the development of the 2000 mortality table, an actuary is professionally obligated to use the 2000 mortality table, thus replacing the 1971 mortality table for the assumptions that we're working with. With regards to wages, there was a lot of discussion around the 5.25% average increase, and the fact of the matter is that due to step increases, which occur primarily in the first 6 years of employment, per union contracts, wages increase in excess of 5% per year over 20 and 25 years. And that is the basis for our maintaining our assumption of 5.25%. Further increases will also occur upon promotion in rank when these people move through the steps. Just as a quick update on Elmhurst has done a very good job of funding pensions. Over the long run, we've made the actuary required contribution for as long as I've been on council and far before that, sometimes when it was pretty painful to do that. Just for example, in the latest 2013 annual report, we're showing unfunded actuarial accrued liabilities between police and fire of just under $36.7 million. We are funded to somewhere just under 70% on these funds collectively, which compared to our peers is a very, very favorable funding level. But we have to get better. Where we need to go then, what does this mean? As the report clearly states, an increase in the pension contribution, which is levied to the taxpayers on a separate line item on the tax bill, in the amount prescribed in our report of just over $747,000, will result in an increase on the average tax bill of about $41. If there is any good news, and I think this is that because of lower interest rates, the tax levy for debt service not abated, which is also a separate line on your tax bill, will be about $15 less on the average tax bill this year, resulting in a net increase between these two line items of $26. So that's really all the additional color that I have to offer now. I ask for the council's support on the recommendation of this report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. Thank you.
Any additional comments? Alderman Levin.
Thank you. Alderman York, I know we had, actually 70% is a good number compared to other municipalities. Are we funding present obligations and also some catch-up on that 70% to increase or decrease the amount of unfunded?
That's exactly right. By taking our rate of return assumptions down and keeping the wage increase assumptions where they are, and then utilizing the new mortality table actually really increases accounts for about 45% of the increase that we're talking about, the $747,000. So yes, we will be catching up if we attain the rate of return and they don't change the mortality table again, things that are kind of beyond our control. But given everything that we know today and using the prescribed mortality tables, we should be in a position where we should be catching up, yes.
Thank you.
Additional comments? Alderman Bram.
Thank you. I just want to say I was one who had a handful of comments offline on this. This is a hard pill to swallow. When you're talking about a table that was utilized, 1971 mortality table, and now all of a sudden we're mandated, it's not a choice, it's not an option, we're mandated to use the 2000 mortality table. And that's part of the reason for this increase. The other question was, and Alderman York did a great job summarizing everything, but I wanted to touch on the wage increase rate of 5.25%. That was a concern of mine, knowing what I know of annual raises and that. I received a further breakdown, and that also seems to be the best that we can do in regards to making that assumption moving forward. The one question I do have, Alderman York, or maybe Director Gaston, is the amortization table that you mentioned in your summary. It does say that we could go as far as 28 years out, and we have chosen 20 years, and that seems to be something that we have done, at least as far as I can tell, for a while. The statement in here says that the rationale is it's important to not defer obligations further to future taxpayers. Could someone further explain what that means? Why does 20 years not defer it to future taxpayers, but anything past 20 years does? I just don't understand that rationale and why we wouldn't choose anything above 20, and what do other communities do?
Alderman York, you want to explain or give us some of the insight behind the discussion between the amortization of 20 or 28 years?
Sure. Thank you. Yes, I will try, and as Alderman Bram noted, Finance Director Gaston is here, but 2 years ago we had the option to select a new amortization schedule 2 years ago, and we chose the 22-year table. And so where we are right now is that was 2 years ago, so that's why we're at the 20 years currently. Given the changes with GASB right now, we do have the option of selecting, of moving the whole thing back extending it out another 8 years to 28 years. And it's something that we talked about pretty extensively in committee. And I think we reached an agreement that you're exactly right, that stretching it out 20 years is stretching it out, and it will affect future taxpayers. But if we, for lack of a better word, and this is a term, a cliche that's used all over the papers now, is kick the can down the road for 8 more years, now all of a sudden, not only are my kids paying for it, but maybe my grandkids or, future it goes into another generation at 28 years. So we just decided to stay where we were. We didn't want to go backwards any further than where we are now. We're in good shape now, but we didn't want to go backwards and be in less good shape than we are today.
Thanks for that explanation.
Any additional comments? Alderman Dunn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to follow up on the discussion that Alderman York laid forth, this topic was kicked around in committee for a couple meetings, and we really scrutinized the assumptions. City staff provided us a lot of information on that, and the 28 versus 20 year decision was a difficult one because that ends up increasing our contribution significantly right off the bat. But you heard the reasons why we went with the 20-year. The return on investment was, the initial proposal was 7.25%. I'm sorry, 6.75%, a little lower than we ended up with at 7% in the report. That helped us out a little bit. We felt we could be a little more optimistic than the 6.75% rate of return going forward, which would lower our burden slightly. And then as far as the wage adjustment, again, that we had a lot of discussion on that. 5.25 sounds high nowadays, but looking at the wage tables, that was something we thought was reasonable on the conservative side, but still reasonable to go forward with. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Dunn. Any additional comments as it relates to our police and fire pension? Alderman Hipskin.
Yes, I'd like to thank the Finance Committee, Marilyn Gaston and Tom Prezine. This was not, these are very labor-intensive exercises that we go through to keep us up to date with GASB and to keep us right in line with our stellar bond rating for our town. And I want to thank them and Alderman and Chairman York and Vice Chairman Dunn for their extensive work on this. This is a great job. Thank you.
Very good. Seeing no additional comments, I'll ask Clerk Spencer to please call the vote.
York.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Conquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Polumsky.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
14 ayes, 0 nays.
14 ayes, 0 nays. That motion carries. The report passes. On to committee report 7.3. This is a committee of the whole report. Clerk Spencer, would you please read the recommendation?
Therefore, the Committee of the Whole recommends that the City Council authorize city staff to apply for and the Zoning and Planning Commission to hold a public hearing on a request for conditional use for height and associated variations for setback to allow the construction of a mixed-use parking/retail structure. Signed by Stephen M. Morley, Bob Dunn, Norman Leader, Danny Polumsky, Stephen Hipskin, Michael Honquist, Jim Kennedy, Mark A. Mulliner, Patrick Wagner, and unsigned by Diane Gutenkopf, Marty Deuter, Michael J. Bram, Kevin L. York, Scott M. Levin, Chris Healy.
Okay, to put this before the council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the report. Alderman Wagner, and a second. Alderman Onquest. I'll just set this up real quick to remind the council and also members of the audience. This report is one of 2 reports that came out of our Committee of the Whole that we had as of September 16th. Last council meeting, we did vote on one of the reports that was with regard to the loading dock that passed. This report, as is allowed by our code, we had a couple of aldermen, Levin and Dunn, I believe, request that this report be deferred till the next meeting. That's the meeting that we're at right now. I know that, I want to say part of the reason at that time was we actually had a parking study presentation, and we were also missing several members of the city council, and I believe the belief was that not only did some want the opportunity to digest that parking study, but they did feel that this was an important conversation, and we were hoping, and it looks like we've got a full council tonight to vote on this. So, that having been said, that's our setup. We have a report that, in essence, right now states conditional use, asking the city staff to apply for conditional use associated with a 65-foot structure along with the associated setbacks. That having been said, I will take comments or discussion. Alderman Levin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move to amend the report to replace these references in two instances of 65-foot to 55-foot. So it would be a presentation for a variance at 55 feet.
So we have a motion to change in the second paragraph, fourth line down, 65 to 55, is that correct? Alderman Levin?
There are two references in the middle paragraph, in the first line.
Oh, okay, okay. At the top, first line, and then 4 down. And I asked City Manager Grabowski, because I want to make sure that this is an appropriate motion. I believe the front yard and rear yard variances stay the same in terms of a 25 down to a 0, but the calculation of the side yard, I believe, is based on height. I asked City Manager Grabowski to do the calculations for me, and I think we're okay by saying the associated setback variations, but according to City Manager Grabowski, the last line of the second paragraph, where it says side yard from 27 to 0, to make it more accurate, the side yard should be 20 down to 0. Are you okay with that?
I am.
Alteration. So we have a motion on the floor to change the report from 65 feet down to 55 feet, as noted in 2 areas, and also included in that motion would be to move the side yard variation from 27 down to 20 to 0. Is that right? Okay, so I have a motion to amend. Alderman Polumsky with a second. I think it's all pretty much the same conversation, but we have a motion and a second to change the report down to 55 and the associated variations. Any additional comments or questions or further discussion? Alderman Levin.
The reason for the motion is I think we've all had a opportunity to digest what the consultant said, to speak amongst the residents and other aldermen, to read comments, Ms. Brenner's comments, and it appears to me there's a significant group of people on the council that feel that, and residents that feel that 45 feet is the magic number, that it is a structure that would look best in our downtown, that some who feel that the additional parking isn't needed, and there are others who feel that the 65-foot structure would not significantly change the character of Addison Street, that there may be additional development which will not only fill the need for that size structure, but will also fit in when other structures develop on that street. The consultant's report could be read as fully justifying a 65-foot structure. I recognize the assumptions are that everything does get fully developed. At Assistant City Manager Kopp, I was asked to provide some information by Alderman Polumsky and myself, and if we're at 45 feet, we have 4 levels of parking, 480 spaces, and a cost of $11.5 million. And we're basically, to remind everyone, we do have a contract, and it's not a matter of build or don't build. That's the I won't say foundation, but that's the base level. By going up to 55 feet, we go, I should say each level up is an additional 120 spaces, an additional $1.5 million. So at 55 feet, we have 600 spaces at a cost of $13 million. At 65 feet, it's 720 spaces at a cost of $14.5 million. To those who feel strongly that 45 feet is the magic number, I would encourage you to consider this as a compromise proposal. I don't know that anyone has the crystal ball to determine 10 years down the road if we build at 45 feet that we should have built at 55 feet or 65 feet. And for those who want to build at 65 feet, it's an extra $1.5 million over what a 55-foot proposal is. It's a significant amount of money. I don't really know what the answer is, what it's going to be 10 years down the road, but I feel this provides a level of parking that gives us the capacity that I feel we'll need. I've spent a good amount of time looking around town. You know, the development right next to Fitz's Pub here is 55 feet, and I look at it, it doesn't look so out of place. I think it'll fit in well downtown. I'm not going to debate further on the merits because I know everyone else has something to say, but I would encourage people to consider this compromise position as something that we can all live with. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Polomsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a particularly difficult decision because we're building for the future and nobody can tell us exactly what to expect. And listening to what I've heard other aldermen say, to support the need for a higher deck at 65 feet, there's an understanding that businesses are seeking to open in communities that can provide a large block of parking, and that having an abundance of parking can spur development, which will increase sales tax income and take the burden off of taxpayers. So I see that point, and parking consultant's report concludes that a 65-foot structure will meet a future need. But that assumes that each parcel identified to develop will develop relatively soon. And I think we should be encouraging growth, but I think that we need to recognize that TIF 1 is coming to an end, and at this point, maybe we should be thinking that growth may be slowing a bit. And there are also some unknowns with what we need to consider in our decision. We don't know how high up on a parking structure people are willing to park before they determine that parking in another surface lot becomes more convenient or another place along the street. And we don't know if and for how long a 65-foot deck may appear out of place and be underutilized. So in situations when the right answer doesn't clearly present itself, I think we're expected to use judgment. And though there are times when compromise is not an option, we can't have half an underpass, I think the opportunity for compromise is now before us, and we should move forward with the 55-foot structure.
Any additional comments? Alderman Brame.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a tough one. And the reason why it is for me, because you're balancing what are our needs today and what are our future needs, and weighing the costs that would impact the current residents of Elmhurst. I want to at least first speak to the study, and some of this will be a little bit repetitive from 2 weeks ago when I spoke about this, or maybe that was longer. The study, as Alderman Polomsky, I think, just stated, really this parking deck mostly is about the future. Any redevelopment, making sure we have significant parking, enough parking for the future. The study itself made some assumptions, and to me, those assumptions were a little extreme. The assumption said that there was, I believe, 8 particular sites that are potentially there ripe for redevelopment. Well, as we know here, Hahn Street has been going on forever and ever and ever, and that's with city help. And I don't know in any much of the near term that we will be seeing these assumed 8 properties that are ready for redevelopment completed, at least maybe even in my lifetime. So that's something that we need to balance. The assumptions of the study, and the study pretty much verifying that this parking deck would be enough for future use. It does say future use if all 8 properties were redeveloped, which I think that, like I said, that assumption is too extreme. When we talked about this a while ago, I don't even know what time frame it was, we also included office space. Today, there's no office space in the plan, and at that point, it was either 3, my memory's starting to fall apart here, 3 or 4 levels of parking, and that was fine. That was fine for today. That was fine to accommodate the parking, the office space, and that was fine for any redevelopment. So I'm not sure why we need to go above 4 stories now when most of us were on the dais when we spoke about the plan with the office space, and that proposal was the same height as 45 feet and was fine. And we all nodded our head and we all agreed to that. If we move forward with 4 stories, we're not delaying this development any longer. We wouldn't need, well, I don't know if that's actually a true assumption because there might be some side and rear yard variations that we still need to go through. So I actually retract that comment because I believe there would still need to go through the zoning process. The big thing is current taxpayers carrying the cost of something that may not be needed for another 40, 50, 60 years. Maybe not in my lifetime, maybe in future generations. As Alderman Levin already stated, none of us have a crystal ball, none of us know when it will be needed. I'm a proponent of developing the parking deck to enable redevelopment within the downtown area. I think it is needed, especially as Alderman Palumsky stated, the TIF is about to expire. Therefore, the city will not be able to encourage redevelopment into our downtown area. So we better make sure that we have enough parking that future retailers would want to move into our downtown area. The whole thing where it comes down to is to what extreme? Do you go to the ultimate extreme, in that case 65? Do you hit a compromise of 55 feet, or do you go to 45 feet? With much contemplation, speaking with other aldermen, I think the right answer, well, let me be more definitive, the right answer is to stay with 45 feet. I don't see a need to burden the current taxpayers above 45 feet today. As we've done in the other parking decks, we could always expand. I don't see that being done anytime in my near future. The other piece of the puzzle is the GO bonds that we would need to pay for this. We would be seeing that as much as I understand. We don't have the revenue to pay for that, so that would be essentially a tax on every single resident in Elmhurst. We could trivialize the extra dollar amount, $1 million, $1.25 million extra, but to me, there's higher priorities. We have stormwater issues, we have sanitary issues, we have street infrastructure issues. I think we need to keep all of that into perspective when we make these decisions. Those, to me, are definitive higher priority than adding one more story. $1.25 million would be significant in regards to street reconstruction in my neighborhood, which I am definitely a proponent for. And if we're looking for a compromise, and I thought about this long and hard, and I've had some input on this, maybe we get rid of the retail on the first floor and do just a parking deck for 4 stories. Maybe that's a direction to go, compared to going 6 stories and keeping retail on the first floor. So I think that we should not burden the taxpayers today of something that we don't know if we're going to need for another 40, 50, or 60 years. Thank you.
Additional comments? Alderman Deuter?
Thank you, Mayor. You know, at some point, I think we might have lost sight of what we get with a 45-foot structure. It is a $15 million investment when you include the costs that have already been incurred to support our downtown businesses and future development. It is an enormous influx of new parking, nearly 500 spaces, all of which will be available to support future development. It is the equivalent of 2 large street decks. It is, when combined with our existing supply, enough parking to accommodate all development likely to occur in the foreseeable future. It is the ability to add to the garage in the future when the growth of our downtown demands it and when it is generating enough revenue to support the expense. It is an extraordinary expense, but one that we can publicly justify. We all want our downtown to be great, and we all want to make thoughtful decisions to support growth and improvement. I believe the 45-foot structure gives us the ability to move forward with less controversy and more certainty.
Very good. Alderman Mulliner.
I don't support the 45 or the 55-foot deck. I think we need to take a big picture look at this. I understand we've got high priorities. We've got flooding issues. We've got all kinds of other issues. But one of the things that drives our city is our economic engine. And the economic engine that we have, a huge component of it, is our downtown. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to start as a council having a vision for what that downtown's going to be. And a component of that is to figure out ways in order for us to eliminate roadblocks that we put in the way of developers for coming into this community. We put in roadblocks by putting in certain zoning requirements. We put in roadblocks by not having appropriate amounts of parking. This is an opportunity. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I've been up here for a long time, and we have gone through this process. We've put up 2 parking decks. We put up additions on those 2 parking decks. And guess what? The additions had half the number of parking places and cost twice as much. So we need to really think seriously about what we want to do here. We have an opportunity to provide all of the parking in a key location. In my entire lifetime, we've spent our lifetime looking at an Addison Street where we need to have some development done on it without having the appropriate amount of parking in the core component of downtown, which is where this is. We'll never get Addison Street redeveloped. It won't happen. So we need to make sure that we're providing that opportunity for the developers. We can't be short-sighted in what we're doing, and I know everybody is very thoughtful in what they're doing up here. I understand that, and I respect everybody's opinion. But I think that we have an opportunity right now to grab the bull and run with it and give us the 6 stories that we need in order to make sure that we've got the parking necessary. You know what? That parking is not going to be wasted. Even if we don't use it today for the development that's across the street on Addison, we've got employers that want to find parking places for their employees. We can have opportunities where we can make some of those floors employee parking, the floors that the customers may not use. So let's think outside the box a little bit, and let's make sure that what we do is we look long-term. Are we burdening people with a tax? There's no doubt. We always do that. That's everything that we do. But the ultimate goal here, to be perfectly frank, is to make sure that what we do is we raise more revenue in the business district than we do anyplace else. And the only way we can do that is to provide roadblocks that we get out of the way. And this is one of the biggest roadblocks we have right now is parking in the downtown. I've talked to enough business people. Yes, I've talked to some who are adamantly opposed to this. But I've talked to a lot more who are saying, there's not enough parking down here. And they say they'll come down here in the middle of the day and they can't get the parking that they need in order to do their business. We need to have the parking now, not in 20 years.
Additional comments? I'll go to Alderman Leader, then Alderman Gutenkopf.
Briefly, I think analysis of the consultant study is truly a matter of seeing it through the eye of the beholder. I think we all see it a little differently. And I'm aware that 227 people have signed a petition against the 65 feet, but 44,000 have not, which means that 0.5% have signed a petition against 65 feet, and 99.5% did not. And as far as the future, may I remind you all that it's really only a second away. Thank you.
Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, I have so many things to say. Let's start with this notion that 5 stories is a compromise. It's a false compromise. It's based on assumptions that a demonstrated need is present, that for some reason we're going to need these extra 240 parking spaces, but if we can't get the 240, we'll just settle for the extra 120. When it's been pretty clearly shown that the consultant's report compartmentalized downtown in a way to make it feel like there's a huge shortage of parking, when what we really have is a parking management problem. What we really have is the opportunity for the city to take on helping people understand where and how to get to parking in a coherent manner. And we've never done that. We've never really looked at what a parking management plan could bring to the table. We haven't really looked at how the little circles the parking consultants drew around different areas would overlap to provide additional opportunities for parking. We haven't looked at the fact that the C4A district that includes Hahn Street shows only 30% parking utilization at its peak. So if that is 70% empty at the busiest time ever, what would a parking management plan do for us? How could that shift parking from the area that feels so tight into an area that has an awful lot of capacity? We haven't looked at that. Some aldermen have assumed that the city has always had a will to build 6 stories, but for some reason in the past, before most of you were on the city council, we changed a document to say, no, we're only going to go for 4 stories. Let me give you a little history lesson, because I was here in 2008 when we did this. 6 stories was struck from the original development loan commitment and term sheet that was proposed between the city of Elmhurst and the developers we worked with. Actually, I happen to have a copy of that memo from 2008 right here.
Mayor, point of
It
order.
actually.
Hold on.
Point of order.
I have a point of order.
I just want to make sure that I have a motion on the floor to amend the report from 65 feet to 55 feet, and I feel like the debate is turning into something other than the amendment.
I think.
Allow me to rule. I'll allow some leeway. This is a sensitive situation. Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, because I do think it's relevant, because I think going to either 5 stories or 6 stories is part and parcel of the same question. It's how high do we build this parking deck? And either 5 stories or 6 stories is going to require hearing by the zoning commission. So I appreciate the opportunity to continue making this point. Because in 2008, when we considered this agreement with the developer, the original term sheet they handed us included a provision that the city would consider conditional use for up to 6 stories, which would include 5 stories. And we've had some conversation in the past about why that line was struck from that agreement and what did that mean. Well, in fact, that line was struck from the agreement because the city council could not enter into a contract that would circumvent the zoning process. So that line wasn't an attempt to feel out the city council to see if we wanted to go to 6.5 stories. It was struck because we couldn't circumvent the zoning process, and there was no will on the city council to try to do that. So I just think that's a really important point to keep in mind, and it's also, part of this whole discussion overall. Why were we proposing 6 stories back then? Well, I think we all found out when we went through zoning last time, it wasn't to add 2 more stories of parking. It was clearly because there were other uses being proposed for that building, 2 stories of which would have been an office space with its dedicated adjacent parking. So 4 stories of parking has been okay all along, as Alderman Bram said. What's changed? Why all of a sudden are we going to 6 stories or 5? Why are we looking at an extra 120 or 240 spaces? What's different? What's going on that we don't know about? What's happened to make this big difference? Because from my perspective, I don't know of anything that's changed. I don't know of any development projects that are in the works, and if they're there, why don't I know about them? What's known to some people that's not known to all of us? Why would we propose 9 potential development spots in the downtown area without ever having conversations among the city council as a whole or city council committees as part of the planning process for downtown? And I find this very disconcerting. And because of all of these reasons, I can't support the amendment to go to 5 stories. Thank you.
Anybody who hasn't spoken yet? Alderman Dunn.
I I think the parking study was very timely. I originally signed this report about a month ago with the thought that we had an opportunity to allow for 6 stories, but when it was actually built, maybe the right solution was less than that. And I think we've gotten some good information since then. The parking study generally pointed out that we appear to have, I would say, adequate parking currently, but in the near future, that won't be the case. I think in 2 to 5 years, perhaps, we will have a parking issue. And that's just based on the 8 development sites that were identified rather hastily by the city staff. There are others also that are potential development sites. So it's really not restricted to the 8. Do we need multiple floors of parking? I think so. Do we need 6 stories at some point? I think we would at some point. How long would we have to wait for that, though? I'm struck by the economics, though, of building 4 now and then trying to add some later. I believe that it's important to have the adequate parking because, as was stated earlier, there are a lot of business opportunities that it's a critical component that we have adequate parking, and we can't fill the parking garages up and then try to build more when we have additional businesses that are looking. We really need that capacity while those businesses are looking to come here to Elmhurst. And we're going through our budget process now, and our sales tax is our #1 stream of revenue for the general fund. And it's important that we as a city support this Addison Street parking garage, and that we build it with enough capacity to allow us to cope with current parking demand as well as the future demand. I think that more than 4 stories makes sense. When we look at the cost to build another story or 2 down the road, it is significant compared to doing it now. Millions and millions of dollars more down the road. So I think the dollars and cents of it are very critical to consider when we're looking at this project.
Thank you. Alderman Wagner, then I'll go to Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This isn't really that emotional of a subject to me, to be honest. And I appreciate Alderman Levin's motion. And quite frankly, if you could lock in the construction costs to October 21st, 2013, when 10 years from now, they come back and they say, we need 2 more stories, and it's going to cost $15 million, I think you'd have my vote. That's just not going to happen. And we don't have a good track record. 2 out of the 3 parking decks we built, we've had to actually add on at the exact same cost it cost us 10 years prior. I don't know where the common sense is in that. The one we got right, we got a check back from Metro for $2.5 million. So I would just say, you look at the facts here, we've got a fiduciary responsibility to the city of Elmhurst, and I think this Elmhurst resident thinks that, let's take this opportunity. I appreciate Alderman Mulliner's comments. I think they're right on, they're spot on. Thank you.
Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important that we narrow the scope of this conversation. We are not discussing, we are not making a decision as to whether we're going to build a 45, 55, or 65-foot deck tonight. The question at hand is, what do we want to ask the Zoning and Planning Commission? How high can we go? can we go to 65 feet? So regardless of the decision that is made tonight, whether it's to support Alderman Levin and Alderman Palumski's motion, or it fails and the original request of 65 feet goes through, that does not commit us to building a 65-story deck or a 55-story deck. The question, the intent of this report is, what do we want to ask zoning and planning to do? So a lot of the conversation that's gone on, a lot of the pros and cons for whatever position you're on, we're going to repeat those same comments, we're going to have that same discussion at some point after zoning and planning's deliverance. Attorney Levin, help me out there.
Deliberations.
Thank you. So to me, I think that the question the intent, the question is, what do we want as zoning and planning to do? Right now, as I said a couple weeks ago, I still don't have my mind made up as to what I want to support, 45, 55 now, as suggested tonight, or 65. But I know this, I know if the report, the amendment or the motion that has been made if that passes, it limits us to 55 feet because that's what zoning and planning will take up, basically eliminating 65 feet effective tonight. And I'm just not ready to eliminate 65 feet as of tonight. I don't think I support 65 feet, but I don't want to get into the rationale for why that is because I don't think that's important right now. What is important is what do we want as zoning and planning to consider? And I at this point, I think it would be wise of the council to keep all options open, and that once we know where zoning and planning stands, then we can have the discussion as to what we want to actually build. So for that reason, I'm not going to support the motion. I don't know that I support 65 feet, but I think it's important for zoning and planning to take that under consideration.
Point of order?
Yes.
Is Alderman Healy's statements correct in regards to the intent of this report? Coming out of this, however it falls on whatever direction it goes, are we really saying to zoning and planning, consider anything between 45 and 65 feet, or 55 and 65 feet height of that deck? The reason why I ask that, because also that takes into account the side yard and the rear yard variations as well. So wouldn't that really mean that the city of Elmhurst is going to zoning planning commission with two separate requests?
I need clarification on your point of order.
Is this report, are we coming out of this discussion, coming out of whatever direction this report goes, are we really saying if this moves forward as read, as written, are we saying that zoning planning commission, please consider 55 and 65?
That's not the way I read this report. What this report does is exactly what it says, which would be instructing city staff to go forward to, as an applicant to the Zoning and Planning Commission to allow for a 65-foot structure with the associated setback variance. If I may paraphrase what I think Alderman Healy said, is until we sign off on the final design, we can do what we want. So that's my take on what Alderman Healy's saying, is that, but from a point of order standpoint, this is instructing city staff to move forward as an applicant to the Zoning and Planning Commission for a 65-foot structure and the associated setbacks. I would say interpret Alderman Healy's comments as you will, but that's what this report is asking for. This council instructing city staff to apply to zoning and planning for a 65-foot structure.
65 feet, correct.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what's being asked. Alderman Mulliner.
I just want to make sure everybody understands that some comments were made that disturbed me a little bit, and that is that there's a comment that was made that makes it sound like there's behind-the-scenes deals being made. There's nothing being made. All you have to do is look around downtown and look at the vacant property, and that tells you where development can occur. And that's what I'm talking about. That's what everybody who's up here is talking about. If you look on the west side of Addison, 3/4 of the west side of Addison is vacant. That's vacant land that is potential development. That doesn't mean somebody's come in and said that they want to develop it and has said something to anybody. Has there been interest? Absolutely. Have a number of people probably backed away because they looked at parking and they looked at other issues? Absolutely, I'm sure of it. but that doesn't mean it's come to any elected official. It's important for people to understand that one of our responsibilities as a city council member is to look at opportunities for development so that we get that opportunity in there so that we bring in more taxes through other means rather than just property tax owners. So it's very important for us to be looking at those opportunities, and I'm very concerned when I hear people make it sound like there's something going on behind closed doors, because there is nothing going on behind closed doors. Things that go on at the city council, this is one of the most transparent organizations that I have ever run across, and no matter what anybody wants to say, that is a fact. And this, while I'm talking about, and I know the same thing is true here, is opportunities for development throughout the downtown where there's open and vacant land and potential for new development.
I want to make sure I've got people who've spoken first. Alderman York, have you had a chance to speak yet?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Not about this subject.
Not about this subject. And then I'll go to Alderman Kennedy. Alderman York.
Thank you, Your Honor. First of all, yeah, I agree this is a difficult thing. I tend to kind of think of this like Alderman Healy proposed, that we can go with these parameters, and some things that I've kind of thought about and discussed with other aldermen on a one-on-one basis is going to the maximum height of, well, going to what the report is asking for is 65 feet, because we could ask for 115 feet, I suppose. But going to this level affords us the opportunity to do some things and think outside the box. And a couple of them, when we first looked at this, probably 6 weeks ago or so, I suggested, well, maybe we could, set a level back a little bit, and perhaps even set the other level back a little bit, but create a green space in front. Perhaps we could use some of that setback to do some stormwater mitigation too, holding stormwater there until some pressure's off of the system, because we know that the parking deck is going to accumulate water, and rather than just have it go right into the system, perhaps we could be creative and do something with engineering where we manage some of that stormwater on site. And I think that the additional height would give us the ability to do something along those lines. As I said before, I'm very interested in keeping this process moving. We can't afford to delay, so I'd like to see us get to the commission with our request. If we get to the end and they say, yes, 65 feet is okay, but we want to make sure that the building looks right for the downtown area and it accomplishes the things we want to accomplish, and it ends up being 55 feet or 52 feet or 57 feet, whatever the case may be, we have that option to do it. I think, as I said before, I think we build to add on. I agree with some comments that have been made up here that that just doesn't make economic sense in the long run. So I'd like to take a really protracted look at it in front of it versus trying to add on later. So those are my thoughts now. Thank you.
Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to just echo what Alderman Wagner and Alderman Mulliner said in a couple of points. And one of those is that we're 1 for 3 in building parking decks. We built the Schiller deck in '91 for $3.1 million, came back 12 years later, added 90 spaces for $2 million. So big chunk there. On Adelaide, we built that in '92 for $1.9 million. 9 years later, we spent another $1.9 million to put in 98 spaces. I don't think this is a difference of talking about 45 feet for $11.5 million and 14.5 for 65 feet. What we're talking about really is the net present value. And if we buy a deck 65 feet right now, we pay $14.5 million. City staff has said 10 years from now, that's going to cost us $12 million more to put 2 levels on. Net present value of that is about $10 million. So we're talking buying a deck for $14 million, 14.5, or $24.5 million in today's dollars. This is a pretty simple equation to me. Addison Street, as I remember it, I've lived here my whole life, it hasn't changed in the 40 years and I can remember. There has been little to no improvement on that street. And so when people talk about preserving the character, I'm sorry, it really doesn't have much character. We need to make substantial improvement to make our downtown far more vibrant, and the place for that to occur is on Addison Street. So I think we have to look at this very simply, that We need another beachhead for economic development. It needs to be Addison Street, and we need to build to 65 feet. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else who hasn't had an opportunity to speak yet? Okay, before I go on to comments 2.0, I will remind the council and the people in the audience who I know can't wait that after this meeting, we do have the beginning of our budget process, and we'll see how far that goes. That having been said, I would ask city council members, I know you want to get your point across, and I'm looking forward to hearing it. Just a reminder, it's 9:15, and we haven't even started a budget process. I'll go to Alderman Deuter, then Alderman Levin.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I appreciate the comments on the economics, and I think that being mindful of using the dollars efficiently makes sense, but I think that makes sense given two assumptions. One, that we definitely will have this need in the future, and two, that we have the dollars currently to spend. And I don't think either of those cases exist today. So I think today our greater responsibility is to be fiscally prudent and try and minimize the amount of dollars we spend that we need to bond for. And I don't think that there is a convincing argument on the table that we will need more than what a 45-foot deck would provide at any point in the near future. Again, I'll just say the 500 spaces is a huge influx of new parking, all to support future development.
Alderman Levin.
Maybe three comments. One is, I think it would be disingenuous for us to pick a number that doesn't represent our true intention when we go to planning and zoning. To go out and fight the fight for 65 feet, if that's the council's recommendation, without the public or the commission knowing what we really intend to do, is a disservice. I believe that what we say tonight, whether it's 55 feet or 65 feet or 45 feet, that's what we ought to be doing and not having this debate again. I understand things may change, but Alderman York, I said ice rink. It sounds like you're saying swimming pool up there for water retention. It doesn't matter how many stories, it's a paved over a lot now. It'll be paved over with a parking garage, and whether there's 65 feet or 55 feet, it's the same water issue. So I think that is kicking the can down the road. I think we need to make a decision tonight. And I think in terms of the idea, I understand it costs more to build, and people keep saying, well, if you add 2 more stories, well, under my proposal, it'll be adding 1 more story, and I don't think we're gonna have to add it. I think we're trying to make our best estimate of what we need. And I understand what happened on the other 2 decks, but if you keep going down the road with that one, when we build our 10th deck, I mean, we're building more and more capacity. So for those who are against anything above 45 feet, this is your chance to have a compromise and say, okay, I'd rather have 55 feet than 65 feet. And to those who are looking at an opportunity to say what the economics are, it's a compromise there too. But, you know, I'll live by the vote. If the 55-foot amendment fails and it's 65 feet, I'll vote for that with the intention that that's what goes to Planning Commission, that that's the will of the council, not to bring it back again and have a different debate.
Additional comments. Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So either way, 5 stories or 6 stories, what happens now? What's the timeline? How long is this going to take to get to DPZ? Because we don't have this building designed. So my understanding is that in order for the commission to look at this, they actually need a design. So we've got to add in all that timeline, got to get the design done, we got to get it on their calendar. They have to deliberate, they'll probably take 2 meetings. What is this going to do to this? We could build the 4-story deck now. We could add the 540 parking spaces that we claim we so desperately need now. We've been sitting on this project since 2008. Everybody's in a big old hurry to get it done. What's our timeline?
Okay, any additional comments?
I have a question. I mean, I'm serious. I'd like to know what the timeline is.
City Manager Grabowski?
We'd have to sit down and look at publishing dates and deadlines and talk with Arco Murray for their design schedule. I can't lay a calendar out tonight, but certainly we can get something to you.
Can you just give me an estimate?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I just like an estimate. how much longer is this going to take? You're coming to us saying we're going to go to the zoning commission, we got a report here that says we're going to build 6 stories. We know that this is going to take time to design. You can't tell me that you put forward this report without an estimate of the timeline.
Point of order. This doesn't relate to the request, the amendments that's on the floor right now, a 55-foot. I mean, it's asking for an unrealistic thing to be put forth right now. It's a point of order.
I'll allow City Manager Grabowski to try his best on an estimate, and then we'll move on. Well, we're in October.
Mr. Mayor?
It'll go before the Government Planning Commission, probably before the end of the year, right? And it'll probably come out. There's schedule, January comment. No matter what, right? Rough estimate is that it'll go before Alderman Gutenkopf. Rough estimate is it'll go before zoning and planning before the end of the year, depending on their schedule, which is their schedule, and public comment and public input. I would anticipate coming out of them with a deliberation early next year, January, February at the latest. There's your estimate.
Thank you.
All right. Alderman Braham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to make any more comments, but
okay.
Some of the previous comments that were made by the my fellow aldermen, I feel the need to clarify. One of which, in regards to the mistakes of parking decks past, it wasn't a mistake. That was the intent of the parking decks when they were created, to have the option to add additional stories. That was the decision of the council. It wasn't a mistake. It was thought out, it was discussed, and that was the plan. You can agree or disagree with that, but that was the intention. The instruction was build the parking deck for X stories and make sure you're able to expand by X stories. So I just want to clarify that it wasn't a mistake then, and I think if this council moves forward with 45, 55, or 65, that is the intent now. One of the comments by Alderman Mulliner, and I think a few other aldermen, was about revenue and sales tax being our #1 priority, and I agree holistically with that comment. I don't agree, though, I think it was Alderman Mulliner's comments, that, our main generation of sales tax should be in our central business district. I think we'd be slighting the north side, the south side, the west side, St. Charles and 83, etc., because sales tax comes from everywhere. We had an opportunity as a council, maybe not everyone on the dais today, of the TIF plus the extended TIF, which I think was approximately 37 years or so, to make sure that we do everything possible in this area to have economic development. We as a council are making decisions tonight, albeit an extra $1.25 million or $2.5 million, whatever it is, outside of TIF incentives. That means it's an extra tax on all the residents who live here today. That, to me, is a serious consideration if we go from 4 stories to 5 or 5 stories to 6. We had the opportunity. We decided on paving bricks. We decided on a couple of parking decks. We've made some good choices and maybe not some good choices in the past, but we've had a lot of time to do so. So I take it really seriously when we trivialize the extra dollars that an extra deck would, extra floor or extra 2 floors would cost, because this is an extra, quote unquote, tax on our neighbors when we say that it's only an extra $1.5 million or an extra $2 or $3 million to add the parking that we have no clue on when that's going to be developed. As Alderman Kennedy said, he hasn't seen Addison change in 40 years that he recalls. And my, 15 years I've been here, I would agree with that. I don't know if the parking deck is going to say, okay, all of a sudden 8, 9, 20 of those properties are all of a sudden going to change. I think that a 4-story deck would incent, in an indirect manner, other businesses to come and other developments to come to the area. But I think that we need to be cognizant of 4 stories to 6, there is an immediate increase in cost, and we should take that into consideration moving forward.
Okay, I'll remind the council, we are currently discussing and hopefully voting soon on an amendment to change the report from 65 feet to 55 feet, along with the associated setback variations. Are there any additional comments with regard to this motion? Oh, Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually just wanted to clarify the process. So will there be 2 votes then on this issue? The first vote will be to accept the amendment as proposed. So
Yes.
it changes the report from 65 feet to 55 feet, which takes 65 off the table. And then there will be a second vote as
Yes.
to supporting that report as amended.
Yes.
So 2 votes.
Yes, there will be, if the amendment passes, then the report officially gets amended to 55 feet, then we still have to vote on it to send it to the commission. If it fails, it goes back to the underlying motion originally stated, which is the 65 feet. So yes, there are 2 votes coming, regardless. Any additional comments? Seeing none. Clerk Spencer,
All right.
I would ask you to call the roll on the motion to amend, I believe by Alderman Levin, seconded by Alderman Palomsky.
Thank you, yes.
This is, just to clarify, this is a motion, we're voting on just the motion, not the report itself and moving it forward. We're voting on amending the report right now, in essence, to lower the structure to 55 feet with the associated setbacks. All right.
Levin.
Aye.
Palumsky.
Aye.
Graham.
No.
Hipskin.
No.
York.
No.
Healy.
No.
Conquest.
No.
Kennedy.
No.
Mulliner.
No.
Wagner.
No.
Gutenkopf.
No.
Deuter.
No.
Dunn.
No.
Leader.
No.
Okay, that looks like 2 ayes and 12 nays.
2 ayes, 12 nays. The motion to amend fails. Back to the underlying original motion to approve the report as read.
We had a motion.
We did, yeah, we did. What was the original motion, Patty?
Who moved in second?
Yes.
It was Wagner and Honquist.
Fantastic. Okay. The original motion to approve the report, motion by Alderman Wagner, second by Alderman Honquest. I think a lot of the questions and conversation bled over between the amendment and the actual report. Are there any additional comments that anybody would like to make as it relates to the original report as written and sitting in front of you? Any additional comments? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Oh, I'm staring at the downtown plan because we now have laptops and I can look at it. And I just don't think the downtown plan supports the 6-story parking deck. And in fact, the vision the downtown plan puts forward says that the downtown should be distinguished by its small-town character, a range of living options, and diverse cultural activities. And I think that that small-town character is something that I believe in. I believed in it when the downtown plan was written, and I don't think a 6-story parking deck is part of the small-town character. Thank you.
Okay. Any additional comments? Alderman Palomsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to agree with Alderman Healy in that at this point, our role is to send this to the commission, and that looking at 65 feet means we're not taking it off the table. It doesn't mean we necessarily have to agree or approve the report from the commission or through DP&Z, but that if it is approved through the commission, that there's the opportunity to have an influence on the design and the amenities, the appearance of this deck, and that at this point, I would support 65 feet because I don't want to take the opportunity off the table. Thanks.
Thank you. Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. There are just 2 things that I want to say, and one is talking about the 8 developments that may come online in the future. I think Alderman Brand made the point Addison isn't where we'd like it to be today, and how much difference will a garage make? To clarify these 8 developments that may come online, the projected uses for those 8 developments include 180,000 square feet of retail space and 46,000 square feet of restaurant space. So the time in the future where we may need that much of those specific uses, 46,000 square feet of restaurant space would be roughly the equivalent of 9 of our standard restaurants that we have sitting vacant now. So at what point will Elmhurst be able to support that many new restaurants the size of standard? And 180 square feet of retail is a tremendous amount of addition to our downtown. So that it would be great if we could support that. When we as a town can support that is when it will be built. But I don't think that's any time in the immediate future that we should be building for today with tax dollars that we don't have. And I do, the second point was kind of to back up Alderman Levin's point, that I think to not be clear tonight on our intent means this process gets longer and longer. It means I think the zoning committee is looking at something that's a bit vague and not well defined because we haven't defined it well. And I think that it means at some point it's coming back and we're going to have the same discussion again for as long as that might take. I think it would be in the best interest of moving this project forward if we can be as specific as we want about our intent tonight.
Alderman Braham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to reinforce what Alderman Levin and now what Alderman Deuter just stated. We just as a council voted on 55 feet. The current vote is in regards to 65 feet. There are no other options on the table other than 45 feet. We shouldn't waste the Zoning and Planning Commission's time if our true intention is not to move forward with 65 feet. That is the current referral on the table, and if we are going to vote on that within minutes, then I think that we should be discussing, or we should be voting with the intent that that is what the greater council wants, is 65-foot parking garage in this location. There's no other options. We'll be sending the Zoning and Planning Commission mixed messages if we're saying, well, 65 feet, and then we could see where we can go from there. They'll just look up the meeting minutes and said everybody voted down 55 feet. So I'm not sure the rationale of voting to assume that there's options in the future. This vote right now is for 65 feet and 65 feet, that's it. So I hope all of my colleagues place the vote according to that and that alone.
Okay, any additional comments?
Sorry, Mayor.
Alderman Levin.
I'm sorry. I think it's important. I agree with Alderman Braham that if we're going to go and make a case before the commission and have the public give their input when they don't know what we're talking about, what they're talking about, it's just a wrong thing to do. And I'm going to vote for 65 feet. And that's what I expect is going to go for Planning and Zoning Commission. I expect that's what will be built. I would have preferred 55 feet, but I think we ought to go with it. The public's got to know when that goes before the commission what we're talking about doing, so they can comment on it and not know that we're coming back at something else.
Okay. Seeing no other comments, Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to please call the roll for the original motion by Alderman Wagner and Alderman Honquist.
Wagner.
Aye.
Honquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
No.
Deuter.
No.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Polumsky.
Aye.
Graham.
No.
Lipscomb.
Aye.
York.
Aye. Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
11 ayes and 3 nays.
11 ayes, 3 nays. That motion carries. The report passes. On to zoning and planning. Agenda item number 8, reports and recommendations of appointed and elected officials. I will keep my report short. with a nod to the time. I also want to reiterate Alderman York's congratulations to all involved in helping Elmhurst become a bronze-level bike-friendly city. Special shout-out to Bob Hull and the entire bike task force for all of their hard work and patience over the years. The other thing I'll report is that I did have an opportunity this weekend on Saturday to attend the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society Western Suburbs Walk that was held in our very own Barron's Park. It was a fantastic time for a great cause. But the other reason why I want to bring it up is that I was contacted by the organizers of this event, both before to help them MC the event, but after, during the event, and I just want to let the City Council know, and also the Park District, that they had nothing but great things to say. They actually moved their event 2 years ago from a sister city of ours, not too far away. I won't mention any names, but they could not praise Elmhurst enough for all the support they got in running this fantastic event. So I really appreciate city staff, police and fire, and the Park District for representing Elmhurst in such a fantastic way. This group came in, raised a lot of money for a great cause, and couldn't say enough great things about Elmhurst. And then the last thing, which I already mentioned, is we're going to convene a committee of the whole after this meeting for start of our budget season. I know it doesn't seem like March, but it's no longer March. This is the new March. City Manager Grabowski.
Thank you. One item for information for the council. The job posting for the Public Works Director goes live this week. So we'll be into that, and looking forward to bringing in whoever that new person is.
Any additional reports from anyone on the dais? Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was a comment made tonight about during public comment about the the sidewalks. Yes. That the petition to block the SSA was not accepted. I thought we read that a successful blocking petition was filed. Can we get clarification on that, please?
There was initially a petition filed that did not have enough signatures on it. We alerted the person or informed the person that turned it in that it was insufficient. That person then went out and got additional signatures, and so we notified the City Council Thursday or Friday that the petition was complete, and it did block the SSA.
So contrary to what was said earlier tonight in public comment, that sidewalk SSA has been successfully blocked.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other comments, or I'm sorry, any other reports? Seeing none, other business? Any other business? Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, we'll take the motion to adjourn, then we're going to take about 5 to 8 minutes, allow city staff to set up, and we'll see how far we get with our budget discussion tonight. Motion to adjourn by Alderman York, seconded by Alderman Levin. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We're adjourned. 5 to 8 minutes, folks.